Hello, Crittenton family, and welcome to episode 2 of our Talk with the Teen Girl series, Every Girl Should Fly. I'm so excited about this series and hope that you all will tune in and make sure you watch it to the end.
Hi, my name is Naomi Conteh. I am a senior in the Christian program, and today I'm joined with Colonel Jennifer Aupke, who is the co-founder of the Milieux project. Do you mind sharing a few words about your project?
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming.
Milieux project is something that my girlfriend Carrie Worth and myself started back in 2016. We started out as just a blog and have just grown and grown because we find that there are so many young ladies that we love getting in touch with aviation.
Yeah.
We realize that there's a lot of confidence and moxie that comes from being a pilot. So, yeah.
I love the word that you chose, moxie. That's really nice.
Yeah.
So what do you think gives a girl moxie?
Attitude,
Attitude.
right? Confidence, knowing that you're capable of doing something.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite stories to tell is about Miss Bessie Coleman. Have you heard of her?
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the first Black female pilots, right? And she had that moxie because she was a pilot. No one could tell her no.
Mm-hmm.
And she would never take no. She was so committed to becoming a pilot that she went to Europe to get her pilot's license because no one would teach her in the United States. And she came back with all kinds of attitude. And one of her best things that she ever said, and I love it, is there's nothing that an airplane can teach you better than like how to overcome adversity. Because the plane doesn't care what you look like.
Exactly.
It's going to treat you the same.
Exactly.
So that's the best equalizer.
I love the way that you worded that. So do you mind sharing any stories about some of your girls in your program? You cater to young women, correct?
Yeah, well, we have determined through research that the young ladies between the ages of 6 and 12 are the most influenced when it comes to the idea of aviation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it bothers me that a lot of people say that they didn't know they could fly, right? Or that there's some organizations that say you have to see it to be it. We think exactly opposite. We don't know what a girl can imagine herself doing, and we want to encourage them to continue to think about bigger, broader things, right?
Yes.
Like not compare. We don't want young ladies to be comparative any longer, but to be independent and realize that there's so much more that is undiscovered out there that only girls can discover.
Yeah, that is so impactful. I love that.
Yeah.
So do you mind sharing about your story? How did you start your journey into the military? You're in the Air Force, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
So what inspired you to do that?
Well, as we like to say, Army parents make the best Air Force recruiters.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was in the Army. He was a chaplain who jumped out of airplanes. So obviously aviation was already something that I was familiar with. But it was my dad who jumped, you know? And he told me he didn't have money for college. So he asked me to look at the military academies. I wanted to go to West Point, the long gray line. I thought that was very interesting. I loved reading about the Civil War and all those general officers. And I always thought of myself as being like one of the guys who was storming the hill, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know why I never thought I couldn't do something like that. So that was what's in my imagination when I was applying to the military academies. Like I said, I wanted to go to West Point, but then my father was very intelligent and had me fly out to the Air Force Academy the day after prom. And knowing me, who, I was a very committed young lady to my education, I came back home from prom early at like 11 p.m. so I could make it to the flight. The Air Force Academy is a gorgeous campus. It's like chiseled on the side of a mountain. There's a beautiful glass chapel that's on the side. You can see it, just glimmers. And it was like Shangri-La to me, you know, like driving up to it. And so I knew that's where I wanted to go to school. I didn't know at the time that was a school that was a direct lead into aviation.
Yeah.
In fact, again, like when I was getting ready to graduate, I even thought of myself as being like in charge of security forces, being out there in the woods or in the fields with men leading them. But then I had to go to pilot training at the time. Everyone went to pilot training and graduated the academy. It's not that way anymore, but that was the thing, was everybody had to fly. So that's how I started my aviation career.
So interesting.
And I love it. Like there is no better office space than in the sky. Like the best view, right?
That's really interesting. So continuing on with your family life, What was it like being a military teen at home and wanting to pursue aviation? Did you know that this is what you wanted to do?
That is a fantastic question. Yeah. You know, when I was a teenager, I was very much introverted. I didn't talk to too many people. In fact, I would just go up to my room every day and read and study. My favorite subject was history. So, you know, I kind of talked about that a little bit with the Civil War and reading about that. And so I think that was really what influenced me the most, was just knowing that being battle tested was interesting to me. And I don't know why, but I was the firstborn. I was the oldest of 3. And so, you know, watching my dad go out and shoot from every day, and we'd go out to the field and they would do field exercises, I just thought that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I really thought that what he did was very interesting, and I wanted to be a part of it.
So nice.
Yeah.
So is it all in the family?
I think, you know, my grandfather served in the Philippines because everybody had to serve back then.
Mm-hmm.
And then my dad was in the military, and then it's kind of stopped with me. My brother and sister didn't join the military now. Yeah, and I don't know why. I don't know if it's just because they didn't see him as much.
Maybe they didn't have the moxie.
Maybe they didn't have the moxie. That's right. Yes, ma'am.
So, why do you cater to young girls? What is it with young girls that you want to have them pursue this type of life and see that there's more ahead of them than just being a lawyer, doctor, traditional role?
Thank you for asking that. It's lovely. Well, I think it became the most important to me when I had my son. That may be surprising to some, that you know, having a boy would encourage you to be involved with young ladies, right? But I see the young ladies that my son is interacting with, or even some of the teenagers that are out there that are young ladies, that I just hope that my son gets to interact with people like me. If that makes sense. You know, I want more women to be confident, to be explorers, to get out and do a lot of things, because I want that to challenge my boy. Does that make sense? And I think that the messaging that we have in society right now is that young ladies have to be comparative to what men are. You know, like, well, you know, all girls can fly, you know, all girls can do what boys do, all, you know, and I see a lot of parents in the playground that hold their daughters back and let their boys lead.
Yeah.
And it saddens me, because I really want more women to challenge my boy.
Yeah.
That's why.
I love that. I think that's really, really inspiring. And I love that you touch on equality and stuff.
Yes.
That's really, really, really.
It's so important, right? Oh,
yes,
really? Yeah.
Exactly. Because, you know, me being out of 3 brothers, I really always have to prove myself.
Yes.
So I love that you're pushing your boy out there to, you know, be a part of people who are proving themselves.
That's right.
Really nice.
Yes,
so as a teenager in the military, how was your mental health?
Oh, well, you know, that's another great question. You were just resourceful as heck.
Thank you.
So my, I grew up and I moved every 1 to 3 years.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't know that necessarily my mental health was impacted positively or negatively, just differently.
Yeah.
I've seen my son who has to learn new environments every 1 to 2 years because I'm moving, right? And my ex-husband grew up in one school his whole life, and he thinks that that's the best thing for our son, you know, that my son only knows the same people all of his life. But I think that I had skills that I came up with because I had to make new friends every place I went to. I had to develop those skills. Now, the few skills that I don't have are being able to have those long-term relationships with somebody. You know, that may be somewhere I was impacted because I'm used to, you know, change out every 3 years. But you know, those things just eventually come. But yeah, I would say it was positive. It was a positive thing that I was a military brat, as they call it. Yeah.
So do you think, as yourself in the military, you know, still being young and even growing older, do you think that being a woman and your mental health, did you have resources to help you out, like figuring out what you're going to do with this aviation dream and career that's going on? Do you think that you had the resources available?
And you know who were my best resources? And I love telling people this. Men. They were like my brothers, older brothers, fathers, that took care of me, took me under their wing, that understood what I was trying to do. We connected, you know, with those goals. And that's who really helped me the most. And I encourage that. We have, with my nonprofit, we try to do a biannual drive to highlight dads, because they really are pivotal to a young girl's life and make a difference. It's important that dads are recognized for what they do.
I agree.
Yeah.
Love you, Dad. All right, nice. So, touching back on your nonprofit, the Milieux Project,
Yes, ma'am.
do you have any stories that you want to share of like a girl who's really touched your heart, has really surprised you, encouraged you? Are you still learning from young people?
Oh, always. Yes. And I think that's very important to highlight, that you are always learning. If you're not learning, then something's going on in your brain. It's not correct. There are so many young ladies that I get to talk to and I stay in touch with, and some of them, they fly and they're like, meh, flew, it's cool. But others, it's like the most amazing thing. And what's lovely about what we call civil aviation, right? The more of the just people that want to do it for hobbies, is that those planes are like lawnmowers. It's surprising how low tech they are that you're flying them. Yeah, and so taking someone up in the air and proving to them that they're capable of flying this tractor in the air is kind of fun, and seeing that light switch in their brain of like, oh my gosh, I am going to land this airplane. And even in myself, right? Like when I go fly in one of those small airplanes that's shockingly low tech, landing it is always a great confidence builder, because it depends on me to get safely on the ground.
Yeah. So what was it like the first time you ever flew?
Scary. Very, 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 very scary. I will admit, I did not know what I was doing. I mean, luckily, there's an instructor pilot with me. It was a jet. So we had these things called tweets. They're T-37s is what we learned on. Now, before that, we learned in the Cessna 172, which is those small general aviation planes I just described, so I can track in the sky. But then we got our pilot's license in that airplane, but then it's the jet, the T-37, which is now a T-6. You've got to have moxie.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you wouldn't be able to do it, And so that's why we say every good girl should fly, because that teaches you internally the confidence that if I can do this, there's really no challenge in the world that I can't do.
I love that. Yeah. Do you have a role model or anybody who's inspired you to become who you are? You are a role model.
Thanks.
So I want you to you should know that.
Well, I mean, I think every day I have role models. There's every person I meet. I love to hear their story, see what they're doing, see how I can challenge myself through them, what they're doing. There is a general officer named Tally Levette, and she was the inspiration for Captain Marvel. The movie Captain Marvel?
Yes, I love that movie.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
That's so interesting.
That lady that's in there just followed Tally Levette everywhere that she went, And that's the reason why she drives a Mustang, is because Tally drove a Mustang in when she was going through pilot training unconditionally. She's one of my favorite role models. But always there's a ton of other women that inspire me. Bessie Coleman, she died over an airfield that I flew over myself in Jacksonville, Florida. So, we're all connected, right? And so taking their stories and learning from them is, the best thing I think that anybody can do for themselves. Yeah.
Oh, nice. So coming back to the military aspect, did you have a community of other women with you?
No, that was the hard thing, is that there's so few women, and it's still shocking that there's so few women. And did you know that back in the 80s, there was many more women in the aviation field? In fact, when the turn of the century, we talk now as though there were only a few pioneers, but there were very many women that flew when the aviation became a thing. And so it's dwindling for some reason, which is another reason that Carrie and I decided to start the Milieux Project, is there wasn't a community. In fact, we started out very early on just having other pilot women coming over to our homes to speak, and it felt like we were doing something wrong, like we were doing it in secret, to encourage these other women, because the stories that Carrie and I shared together in 2015, it was surprising how many of them were similar, even though we've been in completely different communities most of our careers. So learning that she had to deal with being put with the hardest crew because she was a woman and had to prove herself. And I was put with the toughest crew that was like the most frustrating crew because I was a woman, I had to prove myself. We both looked at each other, we're like, we have to do something about this. We can't allow this continuation of having to prove ourselves all the time, you know? And I think you and I just, when we were speaking earlier about, you know, about being compared to our brothers or being compared to other men of, you know, like we got to get out of that mindset of, you know, and, you know, Erin sent me once a story about the first black female pilot of Southwest or something, or United. And I wrote back, I said, that's sad. He was shocked by that response. He said, would that be sad? He's like, I'm just learning that there's so few women in aviation. I'm like, yes, because it's the messaging that's going on right now is they have to take on and show there's these firsts, right? But honestly, we should have many, many, many. It shouldn't be shocking any longer, right? It shouldn't be something that we have to celebrate. It should be just normal, right?
That's so true. Yeah. So touching back on you and Carrie, what really was your last straw for you to like say something needs to change? Do you have a moment in time where that happened?
Yeah, and she and I love telling the story. It absolutely was when we were sharing that story, and we both, the last straw was when we've shared our stories about being deployed and being with really frustrating crews and having to push up with that because we had to prove ourselves. And my commander, afterwards, when we were getting ready to leave this deployment, or getting ready to leave Afghanistan, he looked at me and he said, I didn't think you'd be able to do it. Mm-hmm. And I was just shocked that he would put me in a situation that he didn't think that I would survive.
Exactly.
You know, like he wanted, and I just, that was it. And she had the same exact experience with her commander, said the exact same thing to her. And it's just, you know, I mean, I don't understand why they would have said that, you know, and of course he didn't put anything behind it. It wasn't malicious necessarily, but to know that he was experimenting on my life was something I just didn't really appreciate. And so that's when we decided we had to do something.
I'm glad you did, because you guys really persevered. That's amazing. Yeah. So do you have a absolute favorite moment and an absolute frustrating moment, like a high and a low? Get it? Because you fly.
Yeah, because I fly. Oh, that's fun. That was fun. Well, one of my favorite things that happened when I was deployed with this same crew, who I love all those guys. I mean, I love all the guys that I worked with. They were, again, like my brothers. We took care of each other. Even though we had our personality differences, right? I had shared with an Army dispatcher. This is essentially like what I would call him. There's a name for what he was, like the radio operator that whenever we had medevacs that came in that we had to go take off and fly and pick up, he was the guy who would kind of control us and tell us where we had to go. I was sitting with him one night and I told him, and I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Full Metal Jacket. That might be a little bit older than most of the audience, but in it, there's a song called Flight of the Valkyries. Dun, 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 right? So I told him how I like to sing that to myself sometimes when I'm taking off, because I'm flying a helicopter like in Vietnam. You know, I just thought it was very fun. And so he found that recording, and when we're taking off for a mission, he played it on the radio as we were taking off, and I just thought that I was laughing so hard I had to pass the controls to my co-pilot just so I could like wipe the tears from my eyes. I was laughing so hard, yeah. So that was one of the highs. The lows was, and this really sucks. One of the lows was when I had to pick up a young lady, a girl. In Afghanistan, their culture is very different. And, you know, I'd like to point out that our culture went through a similar, you know, growth a long time ago. We're past it, but, you know, the Afghanis, part of their Bedouins, are very ancient in the way they think and the way that they raise their families. And a girl I had to pick up had been boiled by her parents because she was 2 years old and wasn't listening, wasn't minding her kids or herself, and they threw boiling water on her. That was a low.
Yeah,
that was a low.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, that's tough.
On a higher point.
Sorry.
No, that was really, really interesting to like hear. So in our schools, how do you think we can start pulling girls more and more to learn more about aviation and start seeing themselves in these positions as a future career?
Oh, yeah. So that's one of the things that we really focus on and we are trying to make inroads on is guidance counselors. You know, the guidance counselor we've found out is like the most influential person to a young lady and young man as they're graduating high school, right? So those guidance counselors should certainly know that aviation is a possibility for both boys and girls. It's almost scary that that's a thing, that they are limiting girls' imaginations in that. But, you know, if they didn't grow up around it, like, you can't really blame them too much. But that's one of the ways, I think, and also adding aviation to curriculum across the nation has got to be part of it. I mean, if you really think about it, we're all going to be flying one day, right? Flying cars. Parents are going to be flying their kids to soccer practice, you know? So why not start it in schools to give that idea to a young girl and encourage her to imagine being in that cockpit.
I love that, dream big.
Yeah.
So do you think there's any certain subject that connects to aviation and flying? Like,
so many do, and that's a good question, especially for people who don't know about aviation. They think that, you know, you have to have an aeronautical engineering degree or some kind of degree in the application of weather and all that stuff. But no, I'm a psychology major and I fly. So it doesn't require any certain special skill other than just the confidence and being able to learn, you know, being open to learning. And I love when guys say things like, you know, girls are better at shooting and better at flying. And that's only because most girls are able to absorb information. They don't come with the ego. Remember we talked about that with your brothers, right? They don't come with that ego or the thing that they think they know better. Not that all boys think they know better, but that's certainly something that I think our society, the other messaging, right? We have the messaging to the girls that they need to be permitted to do something, with the messaging to the boys that they're great at everything, right? And so I think that would be a big difference, is teaching girls to give girls those egos, that moxie.
So how do you handle people like men in the military with huge egos just trying to constantly demean you?
Yeah, it's my favorite thing to just kind of turn things around whenever they present me this kind of giving me the attitude of like, you don't belong here or whatever. You know, one of the guys that I first started flying with in my first unit, I would walk down the middle of the hallway and he'd say, "Jen, you're always in the middle of the hallway." And I'm like, absolutely, that's where I belong. You know, I don't belong on this side. I don't look away, and I make sure to make eye contact constantly. It's very important. And I don't take no for an answer, right? Like, it's just not, we can always find a yes, but, right? We can always find just that little bit, and just that tiny little opening of that door, and then just bust it open. Right?
And you've opened doors for so many. So thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah, well, I take off on the runways that other women have built for me. So
yes. So for my final question, I wanted to ask, what advice do you have for young women who are afraid of the dangers of and hesitation of pursuing aviation?
I'd like to say that driving a car is much more dangerous than flying an airplane. The air is wide open. You're much more free than you are in a vehicle on the ground. So, you know, if you're willing to take those chances in a vehicle on the ground, like, why not just give it a shot, take off and fly? It's not for everyone, obviously, but I think that it should be at least something that every girl gets an opportunity to try.
Yeah.
And boy.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for our Christian girls in Pacific who don't know exactly what they want to do in life, but want to be a part of something special?
Yes. So I love the program, the Grit program. It's amazing. And I love what you are doing. And I hope that you continue doing great things and being a part of Grit and staying in touch with it. I would give any girl, any advice would be just try. Don't take no for an answer. Don't let somebody else tell you who you are or what you belong doing. Like, I didn't know that I was going to be a pilot when I was, a kid, when I was growing up. I just happened into it. And so it's the best thing that's ever happened to me, though. So don't limit yourself. That's what I would say.
So a big thank you to Colonel Jennifer Aupke and the Milieux Project for joining us today. We'd also like to thank Pritherton and their programs for allowing us to be here. Thank you for helping us out and giving us this opportunity to learn a lot more from you.
And thank you for highlighting Milieux Project. I really appreciated it. It's been wonderful.
Of course.